But Prince Charles came to the fish market when it was opened, before it became the bus shelter. And I was asked to be one of the businesses that he met with. And he asked me the same question that you did a few minutes ago. To be honest, it tore the family apart. Me and my brother didn't get on. If he said that was tea, I'd say it was coffee, and it was terrible, really. And we didn't speak for a few years. I missed out on his wedding. He missed out on the birth of my one of my children. Oh, bloody hell. We were being treated, in my opinion, very, very, very badly by an organisation that's rich in heritage, got a lot of deeper pockets, and I felt we were being bullied, basically, and I didn't know how to handle that.
Today I'm with Ben Thomas, founder of All Things Business. How you doing, Ben?
I'm good, Richard. You?
Oh, fantastic, and thank you for joining us today.
No, thank you. Welcome.
So you're a local lad to Northampton, is that right?
Yeah, Wellingborough is my hometown.
Yeah.
I was born in Liverpool.
Yeah.
My father will tell you I was also conceived in Liverpool. And then I was born in Birkenhead, lived in Bromber until I was 3, and then moved down to Northamptonshire. Dad had a job with Unilever, so that he was in between Liverpool and Sharnbrook. So yeah, Northamptonshire's been my hometown for 35 years. Or sorry, home county, but Wellingborough is very much my hometown. And
as you were as you was growing up and sort of going through school, you, if I remember correctly, went straight into work effectively. Didn't go to college, university, to follow that sort of traditional path?
No, so Dad was been in print and packaging all his life at sort of sales director, managing director level. Mum was a school teacher. She was at John Lee. For those that watching will remember John Lee in Wellingborough. It's no longer there now. And then at Wren School in Wellingborough for probably 22, 23 years. But I fell in love with, I suppose, selling really from the age of about 12 when I started at Wellingborough Market. So Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, I would do the market stalls with Lindsay, a guy from Moulton who used to sell curtains and nets. And then by the time I was 14, I was working for a guy called James Brown, WH Brown International, that are based in Wellingborough. And I was doing Blackbush, Wembley, Bovingdon, North Weald, selling purses, wallets, bags, etc.
Then this was whilst you was at school age?
Yeah. So I was like year 9, 10, all the way through. Finished my last GCSE exam on a Wednesday, and on the Thursday I went to work for a company called Gem Sales and Marketing, who is still going now. Jane Evans owns that business, and they're a telemarketing company. Yeah. So I started there just for the summer, really, but just fell in love with it. And Mum and Dad they thought it would just be a bit of a phase, for the summer holidays. I didn't want to go the plan was for me to go to sixth form, and I didn't want to. So instead I started to sell appointments over the phone for water waiters, like the water machines. I used to give them away on a free trial and get appointments for Gestetner's photocopiers.
So you was one of those annoying people that rings you up and says, can I speak to whoever looks after your AdWords, or can I speak to...
AdWords wasn't around then, no. It's showing my age. But yeah, basically we were. But that's where you learnt your trade, because you'd probably make 70, 80 phone calls a day. And back then you would have 25, 30 people put the phone down on you, but it didn't bother me. But I think that was just because of how raw I was, because, that type of telemarketing doesn't really happen now, I don't think. But yeah, I was one of those annoying people that would ring businesses trying to give them water machines on a 14-day free trial.
But then you went from that, and then you become a car salesman.
Yeah, so I loved my time at Gem. Really cut my teeth there, because it was just all on the phone, and I made some good friends there. And then I don't know how I ended up over at Croyland. It's owned by the Grosvenor Group, which is owned by the Johnson family, who I've been big admirers of, and unfortunately a few of the family are no longer with us now. They've passed on, but what a wonderful success story they are in their own right. You know, you talk about people building it up. Brian Johnson, God bless him, he started the business, which I think was Cooper Armstrong, in 1983, which is the year that I was born. And he's built that up into, a multi-million pound organisation that's won national awards. I got the job at Croyland, and again, I loved it, but it was my first face-to-face selling, and that's where I cut my teeth in terms of being able to sell face-to-face. Managing expectations and overcoming objections was really hard, because you'd have somebody who'd come in with their Ford Mondeo thinking it was worth £4,000, and they wanted to get into that Vauxhall Vectra at 10, but that Ford Mondeo was worth 1,500 quid. And they thought that they could maybe get that 10 grand car for 8. So you got lots of variables there, and I loved my time there. I was only there 9 months, but Richard Reynolds, who was my sales manager there, he really taught me a lot. So I owe him a lot for sure.
Yeah. So one of your passions, if I'm picking up this correctly, is the sales process. It is the negotiation. It is the right from on a market stall through to a car sales, telemarketing and car sales. These are all what I see as quite challenging, high pressure sales types environments.
Yeah, I don't think it was high. I don't know if looking back if it was high pressure for me because of how young I was, but you can't, even to this day, you can't beat the feeling of when you get a sale over the phone or face to face, or if it comes in on email, you just get that buzz. But for me, I've been fascinated by business. So, the selling is one element, but it's that business process. It's that route to market. I was at an exhibition last week at Excel for helping one of our clients that didn't have enough sort of sales people to support them. And there was a stand opposite, and they were giving away a free app. And I was there for 2 days, and I couldn't understand how they made money from it. In the end, I just went over and asked him, because I found that fascinating. And then I got it, the penny dropped. And for me, I find business fascinating. Mainly B2B. I think consumer is a completely different marketplace, and really, I've got limited experience in that. And it's a different buying process, selling process, completely compared to B2B. But I find it fascinating.
And how long was that period of time in total, from when you left school to when you finished at Croyland?
So I did 2 years at Gem, 9 months at Croyland. I still think I'm the best salesman. 58 cars in 1 month, and I did 8 in 1 day on a Sunday. I don't think anyone's beaten that record. And then after that, that's when I went and set up on my own. And that was really because at Croyland, again, loved working with them. Phil Johnson was like the main man there, if you like. Unfortunately, he's passed on, God bless him, but he was great. And, I remember handing in my notice, and he really didn't want me to leave, but and I don't mean this to sound like how it's going to sound, but I was selling that many cars. I had to come in on my day off to hand them over. So I was literally working 7 days a week. So on the day that I would have off, I'd perhaps come in at 10, but every 45 minutes I'd have, Mr. and Mrs. Smiths coming in to collect the car, and I'd be going home at 4 o'clock on my day off. And that sort of took its toll on me, I think, because I was 18 and not wanting to go out on a Saturday night because I wanted to be the first one on the forecourt on a Sunday to make sure I got that first sale. So I moved on and then set up BMT.
Yeah, and that's really sort of where I was heading there. Is you was still so you was a teenager when you started your first business.
So my gramps, again, this is the third person I'm going to mention that's no longer with us, unfortunately. He left us some inheritance. It wasn't a lot. It was a couple of grand, and Wellingborough Innovation Centre had just opened, and Mick Judge was the centre manager, and I went in there and said, I want to set up my own business. And I could see him now sort of thinking, I bet you do, mate. He's behind Wellingborough College on the Church Street. And Mick's great. He's a friend now, actually, to be fair. He said, I think you need to, do a proper business plan and go and see an accountant, etc. And I was really wet behind the ears. And I went to Barclays. I did a business plan, and I asked for a business bank account with, I think it was £5,000 or £3,000 business loan to get going, but I didn't really need it. But I felt that I needed to ask for that to show the bank that I was being serious. But I didn't actually need it because I had some savings, and then I had a couple of grand for my deposit on the building or the room, sorry, and then to buy some office furniture, etc. The Barclays said no, so I went back to Mick and said, look, Barclays said no, but I still want to carry on. He said, why don't you go to see the Prince's Trust? So I'd heard of the Prince's Trust, but wrongly associated it with like the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme, and I got introduced to a guy called Carl Ellsby and Co. Great guy. I don't see enough of him now, but he was my mentor that basically got me through that period of probably, it was like 2 or 3 months, and then mentored me. But what the Prince's Trust do is they give you a grant. So I got £1,000 that had to be paid back over like 2 years, and I think I paid £60 interest on it. But it wasn't the money, it was more of the doors that opened up for me. And Carl being on the end of a phone if I needed him, helped me set the company up in terms of, you know, getting it all registered, all the stuff that I didn't want to, I wasn't any good at because I didn't know. Yeah. I wanted to just sell and do what I love doing. I didn't want to do all the stuff boring in the background. Bits. Yeah, the boring bits. And that's how I got, that was how I started in business really.
So what was your business plan like? If you used to look at it back now, was it a business plan?
It was probably better than the one I've got now. Well, no, I think it was because I did the business plan back there because I didn't know. I was wet behind the ears. I was doing it to fulfil the needs of others, yeah, not for myself. It wasn't a true visualization of what was going to happen because I didn't know. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a telemarketing consultant because I was great on the phone, and I could make appointments because then it was more around lead generation. You weren't actually selling things over the phone. It's more about opportunities and opening the doors, and I was fantastic at that.
So what kit did you need? So when you think back to sort of that startup, they're going and having a chat with the bank, saying you needed sort of 3-5k, had you costed accurately your startup costs at that point?
Yeah, I knew what my overheads were each month, and I think I did that I think it was for 6 months. And I think some of the feedback was that they wanted like a 5-year business plan. Listen, at our level, I think if you're a multi-million pound organisation in some sectors, yes, you need to do 5-year business plans. But for a business, a startup like that, a 5-year business plan, in my opinion, it's not worth the paper it's written on because there's so many variables that are going to happen between then and the end of year 1, let alone the end of year 2 and year 3. But for me, it was the basics. Just know your numbers. You know, what are your overheads and what do you need to break even. That they were the fundamentals for me.
Yeah. And when you went to the Prince's Trust, as you mentioned, that sort of opened up doors. Yeah. And Carl Ellsby, I know Carl Ellsby. So I was really sort of interested to see that he was your mentor because I wasn't aware that that's what he did. Yeah, he goes under the radar a lot. He does loads of really good stuff, not just for the Prince's Trust, but yeah. So how, when you say open doors, sort of being part of the Prince's Trust, what we're talking here, what impact that make?
So you've got a panel of people. It's almost like a bit like a Dragon's Den, sort of, because you've ultimately got a panel of, I think it was 5 people that decide if it's, you know, yes or no. But they've all got experience in life and business, both of which are equally as important. You don't have to be a business owner, in my opinion, to give somebody good life experience. They're both very valuable. But then it was, you should come to this event. And have you heard about the Wellingborough Chamber of Commerce? This is what they do. Have you heard? And I actually heard about Northamptonshire Chamber of Commerce as a result of the Prince's Trust panel. And there were 2 ladies that had an office out of Moulton Park. I've forgotten their names now. Really nice ladies that would, you know, put on this earth to make a difference and do good and really help people. Unfortunately, the office in Northampton got closed, and I don't know if they retired or if they went. But I think the nearest Prince's Trust office now is in Leicester. But it was just opening up the door and saying, you should come to this event, and that's where I discovered networking events. And at the age of 18, 19, I would go to the opening of an envelope, Richard. In fact, I probably met you there, and you know, if there was
that envelope opening,
if there were, you know, quite often I'd go to a breakfast event, a lunch event, and an afternoon event, and I think my opinion of networking events now have changed a lot in more recent years, and I'm now more around, my focus is more around quality over quantity. But back then I went to everything because I was hungry, and I wanted to meet as many people as I could.
There's quite a prolific networker back in the day who sort of done the rounds and that. So I understand you sort of bumped into that chap as well.
Which one?
Michael.
Markham. Oh, yeah, what a man. So, so Michael Markham, I haven't seen him for years, but what a guy. He would light up a room. Any room he would go into, he would light up. And I think he was one of the founders of Stanair, which is obviously a very successful company in Kettering. And I didn't know his sort of background. And one of the first chamber events that I went to, Northamptonshire Chamber of Commerce events, was at the Marriott, the Delapratt Marriott. And I thought it was great. Table of 10, and they had a sort of a captain monitor, if you like, to sort of host. And he stood up, and the charity of the year at the time was the Prince's Trust. And he stood up giving this very powerful, emotive talk around the Prince's Trust, about how it helped people. And he also shared some of his background as growing up as well. That the Prince's Trust is to help make a difference to people that have perhaps been abused growing up, or have had difficulties with drugs or alcohol, etc. And I knew he was going to come to me at some point to just introduce me to everyone. And then as he sort of ended on that speech, which was very powerful, he said, and I'd like to put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, for the latest sort of Prince's Trust grantee, Ben Thomas. And I was like, oh, does everybody think that I've maybe had challenges in, because that wasn't the case at how I found Prince's Trust, but that was what they were sort of known for, if you like, at the time. And I don't know if you've seen the Prince's Trust Awards on ITV, and there are some, they do an amazing work and often don't get the recognition that they deserve on a more regional basis. But Prince Charles came to the fish market when it was opened, before it became the bus shelter, and I was asked to be one of the businesses that he met with, and he asked me the same question that you did a few minutes ago. So tell me about your business, Ben. So I did. So you're one of those annoying people that rings up trying to sell double glazing, and I think I said something. No, I think I said something like, oh, "No, Your Honour," or something like that. And it was a real good icebreaker. But I've got a lovely photograph of him talking to me that's on my mum and dad's mantelpiece, and every year I still get a Christmas card from him, from the Prince's Trust, but in his own ink, not a printed one. Dear Ben, best wishes, Prince Charles, which I cherish every year, because they did genuinely set me on the path of business.
Fantastic story. And at a point, so you started your own business at a really young age.
Yeah.
Which is not uncommon, but says a lot about sort of the frustration of sort of taking control of basically your own life. But then you took employment and went to work for the Business Times.
Yeah.
Before moving on to the Business Times, what happened with BMT?
So my brother was, I think, my second or third employee. And when I got to £250,000 turnover, which I think was the end of our second year, my dad was sort of approaching, not retirement, but he wanted to sort of slow down a little bit, if you like. He was commuting to London or Kent at the time. He was working for a company called Swan Packaging. And I think Dad then, probably, knowing my dad like I do, and on reflection, he probably thought, actually, do you know what, Ben might be onto something here. So he said, look, I couldn't do all the admin stuff. I just wanted to sell. And I wasn't a business owner. I was in terms of title, and yeah, I might have had the job title as managing director, but I wasn't an MD. I wasn't a business owner. I was just a very, very good salesperson, and I could win business, but we didn't have the right processes and stuff. So Dad came on board and he took care of all that stuff, which he's very good at. My brother was working with us as well, and to be honest, it tore the family apart. Me and my brother didn't get on. If he said that was tea, I'd say it was coffee, and it was terrible, really. And we didn't speak for a few years. I missed out on his wedding. He missed out on the birth of my one of my children. Oh, bloody hell! But mum and dad were the ones that really suffered there, because you got your two siblings, your two boys that you do everything for, just at each other's throat. So 08, 09 came, and that was obviously the big crash. And I'd just won a job with my dad. We went up to Doncaster, and we won a company called Construction Skills Academy, or Construction Skills something. They won a big contract, and we were doing all the lead generation for them nationally. And they knocked us for £58,000. And me and Dad, we didn't take a salary for months. Mum and Dad were probably, they were better set up financially, that they could take that hit. I was like, don't worry, I don't want to lose anybody. We'll get through this. I'd never been through a recession before. I hadn't, so I didn't know what was coming. And I think the thing that really got it for me was, I had my daughter and my wife, Vicky. Sorry, she's my wife now. We weren't married at the time, and she rang me, and she'd had a knock on the door from the council because they'd been told that we were going to be made homeless, because the house was going to be taken away from me because I'd been behind on my mortgage repayments, and that was because I hadn't taken a salary for about 6 months. So, and that was when I knew I had to take action. And I remember my dad, I didn't even tell my dad at the time. I just buried my head in the sand. And I told my dad, and my dad came with me to court, and I managed to sell myself. I remember my dad saying to me, he said, "Listen, son, nothing's going to happen." My dad's brilliant. His words of wisdom, he's always there for me through thick and thin. And I remember him saying to me in the car park, "You just got to treat this as a sales meeting. You've got to sell yourself to the judge, because he or she is going to be the one that's going to be responsible for whether or not you can you can lose a house or not." It was literally in that one person's power. And we came out of there, and the judge backed me, if you like, and said that we were going to part the arrears. And the arrears, I mean, listen, if you haven't got it, you haven't got it. I can't remember what it was, 3 or 4 grand at the time. So I had to maintain payments going forward, but then address the arrears as well. And it was, when I look back, that was a real pivotal point, because that was when I knew I had to make a decision for my family going forward in terms of my immediate family. And then 2 months later, the interest rates went down. So my mortgage repayments went from being up here to down there, and I managed to clear my arrears and then get back on track within about 9 months. So that was really, really close, because on one hand, I would never thought that I was going to lose the home, but I didn't tell Vicky. And I didn't want to tell her because I didn't want her to worry about it. I just got a new baby. I wanted her to be able to concentrate on being mum. And probably there's a little bit of alpha male in there as well. And so I decided to leave BMT, which was one of the hardest things I've ever had to make. And I remember telling the staff, and there was about 10 of us at the time. And I went to a bit of a dark place then, because I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought, no one's going to want to employ me. I didn't even think about what my next venture was. And I remember I spent like 2 or 3 months literally just at home, didn't leave the house. But there was light at the end of the tunnel in Alan Spooner, who, do you remember Spooner?
I know the name. I don't. If I saw him, I might recognise.
Alan Spooner you'd hear him, but you wouldn't see him because he's only about 4'8". But what a man! And he started Business Times with Julie Barnes Ward. So they were husband and wife at the time when they started the business in '91. And I used to advertise in Business Times a couple of times a year as BMT. So me and Alan and I, we built up a bit of a bit of a bromance, if you like, and we socialised together on a couple of occasions. And I remember turning on the telly once to Soccer AM, and Spooner was the stranger on the sofa, and he's like, he always looks like he's been 60, right, in my eyes, even when he was 50, and even now that he's 75, he just looks 60s, and he had like bleached hair, and I couldn't believe it. And I rang him up on the Monday. I went, how on earth did you get on Soccer AM? And we just got on so well. And he reached out to me because he'd heard that I'd left, and he basically said, look, I need to exit Business Times. I'm getting on a bit now. Julian and him weren't together, but he couldn't really exit Business Times without somebody going in and taking over. So I said, are you offering me a job? He went, yeah, I think I am. So I went over to have a chat. He didn't tell Julie. Julie, I think, Julie and I probably, Julie's got she hasn't got a bad bone in her body, but I think it's safe to say that we didn't. We did. Yeah, she was at the time, but I don't think we ever really got on. We didn't really hit it off, and it's probably down to that first meeting actually. But she couldn't not want me in the business because of how good I was, and I was exactly what Business Times needed at that time.
But just to cover, because you've said at the time you've left BMT before going to Business Times, was BMT closed down?
No, carried on.
Carried on?
Yeah.
So is it still carrying on today?
Yeah, not as a telemarketing company.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that we did is we needed to diversify because of the crash. So we went into we diversified into like promotional merchandise on the basis that we would have products that we could then sell. So my brother basically runs that now and has done since. And by the way, me and him are sound. We're fine now. I'm godfather to one of his sons, and the family's back together. Sorry, I should have said that. So we had a terrible 4 or 5 years where, you know, I'd ring mum and dad to make sure that he wasn't going round there, and Christmas was horrible because you know, all of that stuff went on. But now we're very much, you know, back together.
It's a commonly repeated stat that 50% of business partnerships break down in the first year.
That wasn't in year one though. That was in year that was in 08, 09. So I was like 20. So that was like year 6, year 7.
So you've been working as a family, brothers together in the business for that period of time.
Looking back, Jack weren't working really. He was a good lad, but he was But he was living his life. He didn't have the responsibilities that I did, and I think I don't have regrets really, but I think if I had my time again, I would probably do things slightly different. Yeah. But he's doing great. He's got a really good business in terms of how it's not telemarketing, but it's promotional merchandise, and they do a lot of good stuff.
You touched on it earlier, but sort of male bravado, alpha male. Do you think? For the past few years, particularly during the pandemic, there's been a lot more awareness of mental health, male mental health. Yeah. And I'm as guilty as the next person. When I look back over the years, I've not shared stuff when things have been getting a little bit tricky in the business, and I'm looking ahead, I'm thinking, where's the next paycheck going to come from? And I've not shared that with my wife because it's rightly or wrongly, many people would say wrongly. For me, that's my job. I've got to deal with that. So I'm not going to burden her with it. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to find a way of making it work. Yeah. Is that how it felt?
Oh, massively. And I think if there's the pandemic, there are a couple of good things that have come out of the pandemic. One is, I think, people saying it's okay to not be okay. Even though people have been beating that drum beforehand, now it's really got home that it's fine. You know, if you, God forbid, you slip up out of here and you can't walk, you're going to go to hospital and you're going to get x-rayed and you're going to have the right physio to get back to what you were like before you fell. But with your brain and with your mental health and your mind, there isn't anything. And on one hand, you don't want to tell your wife or your partner, but then maybe you don't want to tell your mates down the pub or your mates in the dressing room if you're playing football or rugby. But yet we all have different levels of thought. We all talk to ourselves, but it's taken me until my 30s to realise that, even though historically I've probably had mental health. I wouldn't say I've had challenges, where I've thought it's probably taken me into my 30s to worry about I only care about what people think about me in my close circle. Whereas in my 20s, I probably wanted everybody to love Ben. I want everyone to think Ben was great. Now everyone's entitled to their own opinion, and I'm not really bothered. I mean, if I had the choice, of course you'd want people to like you, but the people that really matter to me, you can probably only count on two hands, really, which is quite sad considering the amount of people that we know.
No, but
I think everyone's the same.
And you can't please everybody.
No, you can't. Definitely not. And I think, but I do think men, and I think there are women as well that struggle to ask for help, but men should do. And there are lots of people out there that will listen and that are there to help people. And I do think mental health was a pandemic before the pandemic, and mental health will be here long after COVID and the next pandemic, if God forbid there is one in our lifetime. Mental health is a pandemic now. More people are taking their own lives than ever before. But we need action. And that really comes down to, unfortunately, to funding, to make sure that we've got enough support groups on a local basis to help people.
So you left BMT. BMT's been run by your brother now, and it's a successful business. And your brother, family's all reconciled and fine. You went to Business Times after a phone call from Alan Spooner.
Yeah.
And sales again, presumably?
Yeah. So I think my title, I'm not one for job titles, hate job titles, but I think it was media partner or something.
All those annoying people who rings up trying to sell you that.
Yeah, but it was basically to go out with Spooner, and he was very much the face of Business Times, and to try and find some net new business. And I quickly realised that there was so much more that we could do with Business Times, because it's got such a good name locally. And if you look back historically over business owners, that some of which are sold on or sold out now, but historically Business Times has been. I remember on his leaving party we had at Asper's, his retirement party. I got the cake done with the first ever front page. And you look back at previous editions, and it was great. There was very few places in the county that you go into reception, you wouldn't see a Business Times on the reception desk. I think my early observation was that it needed to evolve, and we were in the basement of York Road. York Road's got great visibility. There was no signage outside. We had the same phone system from 1991. So that needed to change. Didn't have a website, did no social media whatsoever. Introduced colour, because obviously it was black and white. They were quite heavily features led. So and it had the same features basically since 91. So we gave that a bit of a revamp, and just, I suppose, really just put a little bit of freshness into it, a bit of energy, and I loved it. And again, I loved working with Spooner, and I think if he and I had met a few years before that, I think we would have gone on to maybe bigger and better things, really, because he was great. I'd finish his sentences if we were in meetings together, and vice versa. So,
what's interesting is, despite you speak really highly of your time at Business Times, but ultimately you did leave Business Times 2012, around that sort of time, and then went back to running your own business.
Yeah, so Alan had left the business, and it was just me and Julie, and we just couldn't get on with each other, really, if I'm honest, and it was almost becoming a little bit, I'm not going to say toxic, but there were days, I say to my team now, if ever there's a Sunday night and you think, I don't want to come to work tomorrow, that's the beginning of the end, because you're losing your sort of, I don't want anyone to ever feel like, oh, I've got to come to work, because that's not good. It's not good for your mental health, and it's not good for my business either.
I think that's an important statement, really, because I say things similar to my team. is if you're finding that you're not enjoying your job anymore, then you need to think yourself, and it's time to move on and find what you do enjoy.
And this is one of Spooner's great sayings, definition of madness. You do the same repeated exercise, but you expect a different outcome. You know, you've got to make a change, and some people you've got to be accountable for yourself as well, and people have circumstances that change outside of work that impacts that. And there came a time, and I can't remember, I won't go into the specifics, and I just thought, no, this is it. And at the time, Dan Harding and Chris Burton, they have a business called All Things Code, and I'd instructed them to develop an app and a website for Business Times. So bearing in mind I'm the customer and they're the supplier, but I knew them from previous, if you like, so they were trusted, and I just loved how they worked and how they questioned me and held me accountable, because I've got this idea here and I want it to look like that, but I don't do this bit. Well, what about this, Ben? And have you thought about that? And I was like, no, I haven't. I hadn't done a website before in terms of that journey, and I was really impressed with them. And my sort of frustrations probably at working at Business Times had come out, and there were certain things that I felt we should be doing that were the basics, really, in my eyes. You know, if you're a publisher, your data, etc., etc. And I can't remember how it came about, but it was just, you know, conversation about, right, I want to do something differently. And originally it wasn't about starting up as a publication, as a business publication. I wanted to do something different and come out, because I was conscious of, again, worrying about what people think. Oh yeah, you're just setting up in competition, and I didn't want it to be like that. So the first year was all around us being a sports marketing agency, because I felt that we could offer a niche for professional athletes that were coming to the end of their career, regardless of sport, although we were particularly strong in a few sports.
Is this sort of like the talent management?
Yeah. I mean, we look after Steve Thompson and we look after Kelly Smith. Steve obviously won the World Cup in 2003 with England, Rugby World Cup, and Kelly is England's greatest ever female footballer. But both of them don't have a career after football, after rugby. And that is actually not uncommon, unless you're in the elite level where you've invested wisely, or you've earned so much money that you don't have to worry about work.
Where you get an opportunity on TV or something. The
top 5%, yeah, but working on TV that might pay for a few bills, but it doesn't pay for all of them. And it depends on, yeah. And yeah, if you look at what a professional athlete has had to go through to get to the elite level, discipline, punctuality, professionalism, protein in terms of their diet, etc., being part of a team sport, being able to travel away from home and leave family, etc., be completely dedicated. Those are very, very transferable skills into business. So I felt that there was an opportunity for us to make a difference there. And we worked with a few people in darts, we worked with a few people in football, but we didn't really sort of nail it in terms of, right, this is a great scalable business now. So what we did is we stuck with the people that were loyal to us, and started looking after businesses' social media, because looking after social media and creating content for these athletes that were coming to the end of their career was important, because if they grow their following, brands want to engage with them. Whereas some brands will say, right, unless you've got 100,000 followers on Instagram, I can't talk to you. Unless you've got 50,000 followers on Twitter, we can't talk to you.
So this is, just to clarify, so the All Things Business, when I think of that, I think of the publication.
Yeah.
So is this what All Things Business started off before the publication? Or
yeah, so that part of the business is called All Things Management.
Right.
All Things Business is the publication, which basically came at the end of probably the first year. And that's where we launched a business publication, initially specifically for Northamptonshire. Editorially led, different, clean, fresh design, modern feel, good quality print, quality stories, 60-40 split in terms of 60% of the content would be paid for, 40% would be sourced, which is unheard of in publishing. I don't know if it's the same now, but when I was at Business Times, it was 95% was paid for, 5% was sourced, the fillers and stuff. And I felt that, whether you like it or not in publishing, most of the best performing stories are the ones that aren't associated with advertising. But that's what gets you your following. That's what gives your advertisers the great value for money in terms of return on investment. Having an advert either side of an engaging piece is giving the advertiser greater value for money than maybe being next to a piece that's paid for that isn't as engaging. And so we did that, and within a couple of years became Northamptonshire's most read business publication.
And that's still print. So I feel it's important to mention that you effectively started a magazine.
Yeah.
And in print at a time was there's a drive towards digital. And when we think about sort of like your typical newspaper type publication, you see their print volumes going down. What are you seeing?
I believe there'll always be a place for print. But like most businesses and sectors, you need to constantly monitor, and we do that on a monthly basis in terms of facts and figures. But you need to make the news readily available. And the fact is, Richard, the day that we go to print might be on a Wednesday. The day that Postman Pat delivers it to 6,500 businesses is on a Monday. We've probably updated our website with 10 new news stories. Because when there's a merger or an acquisition, unless it's part of a more strategic marketing campaign, for example, they just put it out there and it's hot news for that day or maybe those few days that week. If you're on a printed monthly cycle, and this used to happen when I was at Business Times, you've missed that print. I don't want to go in the next edition because it'll be, what's happened over the next 4 weeks. So we need to make sure that we've got a strong digital presence. We've got an interactive website in terms of it being updated daily and being engaging, and let people come to us with their news, because we want us to be a hub for the local business community that we can then give added value. And a lot of the stuff that we do, all things business, doesn't relate to an invoice, because it's about building that brand and making sure that we are first for business news. Many businesses will come to us with that news in advance to say, listen, I'm just teeing you up that this is going to happen and we'd like you to get on board, and we'll get on board and see how we can interact with them in terms of email marketing or video work, etc. And others, it might just be a press release that we get. But for us, the digital audience is growing, the social media audience is growing. I can't look you in the eye and say, look, we send 6,500 copies every month delivered by the Royal Mail to businesses with a turnover of £250,000 a year plus in Northamptonshire. But I can't look you in the eye and tell you how many people read it, because I don't know. There's nothing that can quantify that, okay? But what does is your Google Analytics and your impressions, etc. And when you look at the web stats, that's where you get your facts and figures from. I don't think anybody in publishing uses this now, but years and years ago, advertising salespeople would say, if we're going out to 6,000 people, our readership's 18,000. Well, how would you make that? Well, because we get 3 people and every copy reads it, because Richard will read it and he'll pass it to Jacob and Jacob will pass it to Arthur. That's 3 people who read that one edition. How do you know that? you can't. You can't possibly know that. Out of our 6,500, do some go in the bin? Yeah, probably they do. But what we try and do, or we do, we've got Louise and Kat here that look after all of our returns. We probably get between 50 and 100 returns now. Yet in the first year, we were probably getting 200 to 300 returns a month. And that was somebody just constantly going through, and unless they specified why they didn't want to receive it anymore, ringing up to see if they've moved office. Because if they've moved office, are we still okay to send you a copy? And you've got to look after that database. That data is so important to any marketing campaign, whether you're a publisher, an estate agent, recruitment company, whatever you are in business. Data is so important, and that's our most valuable asset, and we have to keep on top of that every month.
So you started All Things Business 2015.
I think, yeah. 15 or 14, yeah.
Now I'm aware we can't talk about specifics because of legal reasons, but an event happened in 2019 that, is it fair to say, nearly sort of pushed you under, or nearly sort of broke yourself?
Yeah. So, I mean, that was probably my most worst time as a business owner. And I mean, Dan Harding was my business partner at the time, along with Chris Burton. They're not now, but that was all amicable because they've gone on and done amazing things with Signing App, which is a wonderful product that's recognised internationally now. But I was very much all things business, and they were great, but they weren't in the business day to day. So we parted companies, but this you're referring to happened at around the same time. And to be fair to Dan, he really helped me get through that from an emotional and supportive perspective, because we were being treated, in my opinion, very, very, very badly by an organisation that's rich in heritage, got a lot of deeper pockets, and I felt we were being bullied basically, and I didn't know how to handle that. I mean, listen, I'm a little bit overweight, I'm 6'5", I'm a lover, not a fighter, but if somebody in the dressing room bullied me like that, I'd know how to handle it. When it happens in business, and it happens from an organisation that you would never ever expect it to happen to you, loads of things go through your mind. Is it me? Have I pissed somebody off? Have I upset somebody? Have I done something that I shouldn't have done? And is this an attack at Ben Thomas, or is it? Do you see what I mean? Because my dad's given me loads of advice growing up, and there's a few that I bring forward now into the business now, and it's make a difference. Make a difference in whatever you do, son, and have a positive impact on the people that you do. And the event that you mention, yeah, there's commercial opportunities around it, but that event has had a positive impact on hundreds, if not a few thousand people in a county that I care very, very much about. And it was a hard one to take, and it probably took me, well, look, I mean, I thought all sorts of things there was going to happen because of the route that we were going down. But Dan Harding helped me big time from a supportive perspective, as I mean, he's only 5'2", so I'm like his big brother, but he was very much like my big brother then, in terms of, we're going to get through this. And then there was also, I've got a very close circle of what I call good friends in business, and I had 3 or 4 that were also rooting for me as well, and they know they are, and I thank them for that.
I think when it's your business, it's difficult. Now, I know it's not exactly the same, and I'm trying to find an analogy that listeners can kind of like relate it to. So if I use an example, which is now out there, if people wanted to do some looking, where 2 organisations, the founder of one of those organisations befriended me, and I became, and I thought was like, in competition with each other, but were sort of like sharing information, just regular phone calls, that sort of stuff. And then next thing I know, 2 of the biggest players in the industry that I worked within started suing me, and completely out of the blue, never saw it coming, and being bullied in that environment. For me personally, it happened whilst my wife was pregnant with our second child, and she started having panic attacks and things, and I nearly walked away from the business myself because I thought, this is jeopardising my wife's pregnancy.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult not to take those things personally, because you've got business, and people say business is business.
Yeah, but it isn't. Well,
but it's your business.
I know, and this is where I think it's, and I'm not similar at all, but I struggle to and this is probably one of my downfalls as a business owner, if you like, is I expect everybody to, not everybody, I want people to work as hard as I do and care as much as I do. But then I've got this little chimp here that's going, hold on a minute, Ben, come on. They're part of a team. They work 9 till 5, or they're doing this. They're not part. How on earth can you expect them to do that? And that I've found that hard, and I still do now to this day. But when people say business is business, leave it at work. You can't. If you're working for a big corporate, you've got your job title and you've got your. But I've got the livelihoods of 26, 27 people here. And as we grow, I want it to be more, because I want people to progress and I want them to develop and evolve, and I want to leave a legacy for my children as well. So when people I do take it personally, and it's difficult, and I might be wrong. I might be wrong to think that, but if I make a mistake, I put my hands up and I apologise. But when someone's attacking you or an organisation's attacking you, I can't help but take it personally. So that was a tough period, and that went on for, it probably went on and off for about 12 months. So it was a real tough period.
And then the kicks didn't stop coming, because then we moved into the pandemic. There's 2 stories from the pandemic, really, that I'd like to hear your take on. One was the impact to you as a business and what happened to your company during that time. But then what you did with things like the ATB arms.
So we'll go with the more negative one first. So we moved in when I separated from Dan and Chris. We was in the barn at No Bottle, and we moved into the Innovation Centre over at Northamptonshire, opposite the train station. And we were in an office, and there was only, I don't know if there was 6 or 8 of us. I remember Dan Cole. He doesn't work with us now. He works in Milton Keynes. Great guy, but he always used to come in on a Monday, and he never had a desk to sit at. It was, you look back on these sort of fond little quirky memories, and things were going well for us. And I said to our landlord, can we move to a bigger office? And he went, well, we've got this one here, but it was massive. And they did us a little bit of a deal. So this one was 600 quid a month, and that one was 3 grand a month. I left it a month or 2 and did a couple of rejections, needed to win a bit more work. And I said, okay, we'll do it. So we signed the paperwork on the Friday. Don't quote me on this, but I think it was the 19th of March. I might be wrong. Got the keys, moved bits and pieces in over the weekend. On Monday, the 22nd, lockdown happened. And I remember Fraser was with me. And I remember watching Rishi Sunak and, no, it was Boris, I think. It was Boris on this occasion. Rishi Sunak came later when he announced furlough, etc. And I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I just bought Chris and Dan out in 6 months before in terms of partnership, business ownership. Here I am, gone from 600 quid a month to 3 grand a month. And now I'm thinking the world is just going to fall beneath me. That happened at about, I think Boris gave the news at about 4:45. Yeah. But earlier, before that afternoon, we lost £15,500 in advertising revenue, because the classic national press had leaked various bits and pieces, and that was, we were due to go to print the following week. So every time the phone rang that afternoon, it was a cancelled order. Now, to put it into perspective, 15.5 grand, I don't know, our average order value is probably about 800-900 quid. So there's quite a few phone calls for a small business like us to take. And Fraser had only been with me 6 months. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And I didn't know what was going to happen, Richard. And fast forward then, I don't know, a couple of weeks when people had actually realised, first of all, I was scared because of the health and well-being of everybody. I got a couple of my colleagues that live with elderly people. I was scared for my mum and dad, because they're sort of in their 60s. My mum's diabetic. My girls, they're 13 and 10 now, so they would have been 11 and 8. They're asking me questions that I didn't know the answers to. So you've got all this going on, and yet you still got to try and run a business. And as it all started to sort of come through, I remember saying to my team, we used to have a Zoom call every morning, every afternoon, and I said, listen, I don't know how we're going to get through this, but we're going to get through it. And what we did is we just made decisions, and they were big decisions, but we made them quickly. So there were companies that maybe put their staff on furlough, but they still needed to have some marketing support. So there was an opportunity for us to maybe increase that there a little bit to help them, and then still try and charge them a little bit more. We decided that we weren't going to send All Things Business out. We went online with All Things Business as an online edition, but then we also gave people the option to receive it at home. So, and I don't know, I think we ended up sending about it's like 11 or 1,200 copies a month to people's at home, because
I actually now get mine at home.
Yeah, because you weren't going into the office, whereas you'd always receive it at the office. We communicated with them digitally and said, listen, we're still publishing. We're going to put it home. And we did think about closing, and Julie Barnes-Ward probably made a really, really tough decision, because she was coming up to a milestone for Business Times in terms of years in business. She made the decision to shut the doors. But for me, I still felt like we had duty probably sounds the wrong word, but I felt like we've got a voice, and we can hopefully make a difference. And, if I look back now, you mentioned the ATB Arms. Every Thursday, 4 till 5, we did a really crap music quiz that Fraser did. And I said to everybody, you've got to have something wet in your hand in a glass. And if it's alcoholic, great, but if it's not, it doesn't matter. And we used to sing Sweet Caroline at the end, and it was done on Zoom. And I think at our peak, we had 70 people. That was our biggest one, but we'd typically be between 30 and 40 people every week.
Before I just cut in there, I don't think, I don't want you to undersell that in the sense, because I remember that happening. And I did come along to a couple of the ATB Arms, as it was called. And I remember how worried so many small business owners were in those Zoom calls. And sort of some of the conversations, some of the people voicing the concerns they had, that one small thing brought a lot of people together, who were used to going into an office environment, used to being sat with colleagues, used to being out at networking events or within the business community, and now they're at home alone with nobody to talk to. And the crap music quiz, as you put it, with the Sweet Carolina, actually gave people just something to look forward to during a time when so many people were feeling and going through the emotions that you've just described yourself was going through, but you still did that.
I think it was a bit more of, I felt that we had this presence that we could make a difference locally, and that difference was just telling people it's going to be all right. Yeah. But I almost felt like a bit of a swan. It'll be all right. But under the water, I didn't know how it was going to be all right, because it was the first time in my life I didn't feel in control. Generally speaking, as business owners, generally feel in control of your life in terms of where you're going, generally speaking, apart from when you hit that bump in the road, yeah? That was the time where you felt like you were like that, because you didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. Listen, this could set me off on one now. But as a country, we were getting around the televisions at 5 o'clock to see how many people had died that day or died the previous day, and watch these statistics. It was an incredibly scary place to be. And that was just as a normal human being, not a business owner that's employing 2 people, 20 people or 200 people. And I described it as, we're all at sea. Some of us are in dinghies and some of us are on the QE2. Some of us have got leaks and some of us have got people that are paddling in the wrong direction. Whatever boat you're in, just stay afloat. And we were in a dinghy. And I think for me, it brought the best out of this wonderful community that we've got. And some of those people, I've never met. but I've seen what they're like at their home, and I know what they drink. Yeah, but I've never met them face to face. But I met them every other week or every week whenever they joined the ATB Arms, and that was good. And we introduced other video content. Our video content went up at so many levels in terms of not necessarily from a quality production perspective, just in terms of frequency. So I got my black book out and started interviewing people. Some of it would be talking around stuff that was going on in the pandemic. Some of it wasn't. East Northamptonshire Council. This is when there was the small business grant. I think it was 10 grand there was a criteria of 5 grand and 10 grand, I think. And Jonathan Nunn, Northampton councillor, was fantastic. He was great. He gave me an update. So we did it before it went out, and that got like thousands of views. And we then pushed that content out to help business owners to say, listen, you're entitled to 5 grand, you're entitled to 10 grand. This is how you do it. Yeah. East Northamptonshire Council, unfortunately, didn't communicate as best they could have done with their business customers. And that was brought to my attention. And we reached out to them to do a similar interview to Councillor Nunn. They refused. So in the end, I rang the chief exec's PA and said, look, we're publishing this story tomorrow that basically says that you're not helping the business community, because somebody contacted us and said that they'd had a very poor uptake in grant applications. And quickly I got a response from the communications director there, or the communications officer, and the grants were then publicised on their social media, on their homepage. We then helped to promote that to our readers, the recipients of All Things Business in the East Northampton area. And I probably got about 25, 30 emails of thanks from people that had, as a result of that, had then applied for it. And it's little things like that. There's no commercial gain for us there, but if I've got the opportunity to help a business when they're in a terrible situation like we all were, why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I do that? So, and then we did some quirky stuff, Razor Ruddock interviewed Robbie Williams from LA in his house, but on our platform. I interviewed Sir Captain Tom, God bless him, and we introduced this An Evening With. So when we're out of the pandemic, which restaurant you're going to go to, it's got to be one locally really, and which 3 people you're going to take, past or present. And it was trying to find like a bit of a spin, just so people could, some people loved it and we got messages and stuff, and some people probably hated it and thought, oh, here they go again, and they would have switched off after 30 seconds. But it was just about doing things differently to keep us prominent.
But you was doing you was getting little to no advertising. Basically, you had all those cancelled orders for your revenue that was to sustain your business. You was doing all these supportive actions and things to support businesses in the area, be them customers or not. Either way, you were supporting those, despite what you was fighting with yourself back in your business. I'd argue that, not argue, it's actually a real positive that when we moved to the end of the pandemic, All Things Business has come out stronger off the back of it.
Yeah, I think from a brand perspective, definitely. Yeah. All Things Business has definitely come out of it as a stronger brand. I think, look, the financials were terrible during that pandemic on the publishing side, but we had other business interests in terms of services that could offset that. The biggest disappointment was our landlord, because I'd gone from 600 quid a month to 3 grand a month in the space of one working day. Was then told that we had this holiday freeze of rent for 3 months. So I'm thinking, I think it was July, August, September, or it might have been June, July, August. No, it was the March. So it was April, May, June that we would have had this holiday of rent. And then I got an email in the August to say, oh no, that the person that told you that was wrong. Here's an invoice for 9 grand plus VAT. So I wasn't happy then at all. And because of maybe previous experiences where bigger organisations I felt have attacked me or taken advantage of me, I tried my best to give them the wrath of my tongue. And I kicked up a stink, and I still kick up a stink now, because that was wrong on so many levels, particularly as the opening sentence is to help young and small businesses of Northampton prosper and grow. But hey, it is what it is. I'm sure that the person or people that made that decision aren't in Northampton and they're further afield. But overall, we employed somebody during the pandemic and I never even met them. I mean, if you'd said that to me, I would never have. Who does that? But then again, who buys a car without driving it? And yet,
people doing it.
Exactly. So, I was also fascinated at how other businesses coped, because I started to watch stuff and read stuff online about previous recessions, and basically those that invest more or maintain their marketing spends generally come out of recessions stronger. Those that say marketing is the first thing that's got to go are the ones that sometimes suffer more. And I tried to keep hold of a lot of that. And then I also admired how other businesses were doing it. And, we had a couple of customers that actually increased their advertising spend with us in All Things Business during that time.
As we move now towards sort of the current day and we're out the other end of the pandemic, COVID's still around. I'm sat here having had it for the first time a couple of weeks ago. All negative, we're all fine.
Don't worry, I'm fine with that.
You're expanding. You're going through a merger at the moment.
Yeah. So we're with. So here we are in our new offices. This is your first time here, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
So we moved into this office space in between Christmas and New Year, and I reached out to Rocket, a company that are very well respected in Northamptonshire and further afield, and sort of February time, had a few conversations, all went well. So it's all going through at the moment, although we are operating from here at the moment, and have been for the last, where are we now? 2 months. So that's all going through. So the paperwork with the professionals, and that will all get signed in the coming weeks. So, but yeah, exciting times ahead. I'm learning about change and, people, and going from managing a relatively, listen, we're still a small business, but relatively small team to a bigger team brings its own challenges. And I'm learning. I didn't go to university of how to be a managing director. I haven't got any honours or degrees, etc. So I'm very much self-learning. I love it. I get most decisions right, but there are a couple that I get wrong, and I just got to learn from them. But exciting times ahead for sure.
So, being as somebody who's not studied business, you just said you're learning it on the fly. You've started a business twice now. What makes you do it? What makes you choose to take on all that responsibility of trying to run a business and do things that you've never studied, you've never learned, you presumably know or don't know what you don't know, but still decide to do it anyway?
Great question. I think the one thing that I love about my life, professional life, this is because my personal life has suffered as a result of the business. And what I mean by that is there's been times where the family have suffered, if you like, and they've had to make sacrifices. But I've got a very supportive wife, and my kids are great. They understand if dad can't come to that thing at school, which is bad, and I have made those changes in more recently. But if daddy's got to be in London for 2 days, or he's got to be down at the Excel and stay away for 3 days, they understand the reasons why. No one week in my life is the same. And I say this to the team as well. Every Friday when I drive home at work, when I look back at what we've achieved as a company in that week and the differences that we've made for our customers and for our own business, that's what makes me proud. Because strategically we plan, and I can show you now the work that we're going to be doing next week. So I can say, right, that's the video team, that's the accounts team, that's the account management team, that's the studio, that's the videography team. This is the work that we're doing next week. These are the stories that we're going to be writing for All Things Business. This is the supporting stuff we're doing. But on Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, that could all go out the window. And it's the reactiveness to it because of what happens with customer demands, etc. So to answer your question, it's the buzz, the fire in the belly keeps me going in terms of no one week is the same.
Do you think there's a particular trait for entrepreneurs that sort of relish the chaos almost?
I don't know. I mean, when I look at entrepreneurs, I look at people like yourself, Dan Harding. I think Northamptonshire is blessed with lots of entrepreneurs, and I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't know if I aspire to be one, but I might have entrepreneurial traits in terms of diversification, etc. But when I look at what I call proper entrepreneurs, I look at them and not in awe, but I really look up to them. Established business leaders that have done really, really well over longevity. And I don't know if that is a little bit of, there probably is that element of, I think they're all probably swans, in terms of having a little bit of chaos internally. But I admire all of them really. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
I don't know, we'll roll back to that in a minute then.
All right, okay.
So, because we've spoken about your journey through your business life. We've reached a point where you're currently, all things business is going through a merger, the business is about to expand. We've covered that during a time when you had a couple of quite significant kicks in your business life, and despite that, for no financial gain during that time, you did quite a lot to support businesses in the area, and then alongside that, you've also, with a couple of other people as well, set up, for example, the Northamptonshire Schools and Business Alliance.
Yeah.
And tell us what that does.
So, Northamptonshire Business Excellence Awards is the event that we founded. And the year after we launched that, somebody came up to me and said, you need to do the same for the education sector. The education sector locally doesn't have anything like this, and it needs to. So education's always been close to my heart because obviously my mum. I look back on the amazing work that my mum did, going above and beyond for children, giving, maybe my old football boots, for example, once I went from a size 9 to a 10, she'd make me polish them and then she'd give them to a child at school and stuff like that, yeah? If there was one other good thing that's come out of the pandemic, it's the appreciation that people have got as a society for school teachers and other people that work within schools. We saw quickly that there was not a big gap, but there was a gap between the local business community and the local education sector. And while SEMLEP, who do an amazing work across the region, the people that, Vicky Morton, for example, does a great job, but Northamptonshire is a big old place. You probably need 4 Vicky Mortons to do that. So really what I said, listen, why don't we come up with an alliance that brings together those that want to get involved with education and business. And SEMLEP are on board, and Vicky comes along to those meetings. They happen every quarter. We beg, steal or borrow a venue, and we ask the host to put on, refreshments, and we just facilitate that. And that's because business needs education and education needs business. The managing directors of tomorrow are in a primary school or a secondary school within 30 miles of this office, yeah? Why should we lose good tech coders, marketing, engineers, sales professionals to Manchester or to London or to Birmingham or to Peterborough or to Cambridge when we've got a thriving business community here? And the thing that I was shocked about was not enough schools, or not many schools, do as much work experience as what they used to. Too many schools are using suppliers that don't have an NN postcode, and businesses don't engage as much with schools in terms of going in for the world of work days and inspiring year 11 students or year 10 students or year 5 and 6. And again, I felt that we could make a difference. And you have to be careful, because at the end of the day, we're a business, not a charity, but that's our CSR. that's the bit that makes me feel proud. You know, if I'm having Sunday dinner with my mum and dad and I tell them about the NSBA, I can't summarise that in 10 minutes for them because they need a bit longer to process it, and my dad he'll question me and stuff. But that makes me feel good with them as well. And already we've seen so many success stories where businesses are now working with schools, where you've got directors that are now active governors of schools, because that was one of the key things that we found with schools locally is they want active governors. They just don't want governors to say, yeah, you know, it looks good on my LinkedIn profile to say I'm a governor, or it looks good to say, you know, on my resume. They want to make a difference in those schools, and we've already, that's happened. There's been some sponsorship opportunities where companies have sponsored playground equipment and stuff, and some work placement as well. I think we've got somebody coming in here in a couple of weeks' time, actually for 2 weeks. That's happened as a result of the NSBA. So it's just about making a difference and bringing the schools and the businesses together and say, look, talk.
But education's always something that's at the forefront of my mind, because you was also very instrumental in creating the Tech Together campaign during the pandemic.
Yeah. So again, the pandemic, you hear about these negative news cells, if you like, on a national basis, and I'd never heard of digital poverty. You take for granted that the internet's readily available and that everybody has the internet, and then you think about kids that are learning from home because of the pandemic, and then when you hear that little Johnny, little Lisa and little David have got one laptop between them and therefore they can't learn at the same time, you then go, wow, that ain't right. That isn't right. So I came into work one day and I said, look, guys, I've just heard this on the radio. We can make a difference here. And Fraser said, look, go on, and what are we going to do? And I said, right, I want a campaign to reach out to the business community to say, empty your drawers or your IT cupboard. How many old laptops or iPads or whatever have you got there? And let's see if we can get these refurbished somehow and redistribute them to schools in Northamptonshire, and then they can then give them to the homes. And reach out to John Thorpe, who's a good mutual friend of ours, and he just got behind it. And Richard Kipling, who's one of his tech engineers, he gave up his weekends and evenings. I think there was even one weekend where he took his kids in to help him to basically make sure that they were ready. Because Louise, who works for me, she was great. She was going here, there and everywhere to collect them. I think we had just over 600 devices given to us, but only about 400 passed the MOT, if you like. The rest of them were unfortunately, didn't survive. But that's 400 families or 400 kids that have now got them. So that was us and ACS together doing our bit to make a difference. The sad thing in that is, being in that situation, but that is sustainable. And in my opinion, local government should be able to continue. Now, they can either pay us to do that as a business, and I can, say, right, Louise can run that contract and she can spend 2 days a week on it to make sure that maintains, or they can just go and do it themselves. But that model works. We've proven that it works. And the other sad thing is, from the bit of research that we did through the NSBA, we reckon that there is about 2,000 pupils that don't have the ability to learn at home. Now, hopefully, kids don't have to learn from home again. But imagine what they could do with additional homework, etc., if they did have that setup available to them. And we can give those devices to the schools, and the schools can loan them to the pupil until they leave school, and then they can be replenished potentially, yeah? But 400 out of 2,000, part of me thinks we're pissing in the wind. But there's 400 kids more than it wasn't, but that should be 2,000. We shouldn't have digital poverty in Northamptonshire when you've got the great business community that we've got. I've got no doubt in my mind we could solve that within a year. But why should it fall on All Things Business and Ben Thomas and Louise Garrett and Richard Kipling and John Thorpe and ACS to do that when we've proven it's worked? give that to local government and say, look, we've proven its work. Now go and solve that problem.
And that's an interesting question. So before I roll back to what I asked earlier, there's another organisation or another sort of personal cause that you support. Kelly, if I write this down, We Mind the Kelly Matters. Yeah.
Yeah. So during the pandemic, actually, I think this was just before. This was like in the February time. There's a lad I went to school with called Eugene Parbury, who committed suicide. And Eugene, I remember him from school. We were friends on Facebook, but I didn't like keep in touch with him. But he was just someone. If I saw him in the street, I'd say hello. He's one of those guys that I knew, and incredibly sad. And when I learned about that, and then the pandemic was only a matter of weeks away, I thought to myself, I've had my challenges with mental health in the past, and I thought this could get a lot worse. So the team, again, I went into the office one day. I come in sometimes with these ideas, and I imagine the team probably go, here he goes again. And I said, look, we've got an opportunity to make a difference here. So I reached out to my account manager at Clearview, the advertising board. And there's an advertising board in Wellingborough near the embankment, and it had nothing on it. So I reached out to her and I said, listen, this is what I want to do. Can you help me? I want to put together a campaign that says Wellingborough Cares. And it is all about, we did this campaign, and it was just to say, people of Wellingborough, if you're struggling, ring one of these support agencies. And Alex Goldsmith, who's the CEO of Medigold Health, I reached out. He got wind of what I was doing, and he just said, Ben, I love what you're doing. I want to share the cost with you. And I'd already got, like, Clearview had done us an extremely good rate, so we were only talking hundreds of pounds. But it was to Alex, it wouldn't have mattered if it was hundreds or thousands. He wanted to make a difference with me because he's a Wellingborough lad as well. And I then got introduced to John Hewitt, John Hewitt founded the Glazewright Group, and that was based in Wellingborough. And ironically, his parents used to live next door to my mum and dad. They were the caretakers at Wren School. So I know Dave and Jerry, and they had this massive Alsatian that always used to scare the crap out of me, because it would just jump up at the fence and bark. You'd never see it coming. And but John and I never knew each other. We've got lots of friends in common, but never knew each other. And his daughter, Kelly Hewitt, tragically took her own life 4 years ago now, 4 years ago. And he and Rachel is Kelly's mum, created the charity. And I had a conversation with him and over the phone, and I'm just in complete admiration of the guy, what he and Rachel and Amy, Kelly's sister, and the rest of the family and close friends have gone through. I didn't have the pleasure of knowing Kelly, but I know her story, and it's tragic, but they want to make a difference to make sure that doesn't happen again. So we sort of then got rid of Wellingborough Cares, if you like, because it already existed in We Mind and Kelly Matters, but they were at their infancy of setting up the charity. And we collaborated and just helped to spread the message to say, look, we're here. And I was very proud 18 months ago when John asked me to be a trustee. Kelly Hewitt's idol growing up is Kelly Smith. I managed Kelly Smith, England's greatest ever goal scorer. So when I told Kelly Smith the story, and she herself has had her own challenges with mental health, she just said, what can I do to help? So John and Rachel wrote her a letter and asked her to be patron, which she is. So that charity now, we've got a very great bunch of passionate trustees, have raised enough money to fund, I think we've got about half a dozen, maybe 8 counsellors, and we've got a CEO in Sherry Adams who's amazing. She's great. She leads that team. I don't know how she does what she does, but she does it. And we've got a tech service as well, because some people don't want to pick up the phone and say, I need help. They don't want to send an email, but they're quite happy to maybe text. And that charity is saving people's lives without a shadow of a doubt. And that makes me feel very proud, because I play a very, very, very small part in that. But it gives me something to be able to talk to people about and signpost and point them in the direction. And it's a charity that's making a difference.
So when we go back to my earlier question then, you've mentioned a couple of times there where you walk into the office and, you know, your team here be like, he's off for one again. But the point is, you'll say like, we can make a difference here. We can make tech together. We can make a difference here. Yeah. We might sort of, you know, Wellingborough Care. We can make a difference here. And your journey into there, you've said these things. So I'll ask you, when you think of what is an entrepreneur? What is an entrepreneur?
An entrepreneur to me is somebody that's, and this might even be the wrong definition, but in my mind, it's somebody that's got multiple businesses and is very successful, both financially and maybe including that successful mergers and acquisitions, successful selling of businesses, sales of businesses, yeah? And this is going to sound cheesy, but I don't think entrepreneurs call themselves entrepreneurs either. I'm not a big. You'll never find entrepreneur on one of my LinkedIn profile, and I think you look at Dragon's Den. Peter Jones is a serial entrepreneur. Lord Sugar, serial entrepreneur, because they understand business, they understand the scale of it, and I just don't. I'm not in that league. Listen, I don't know if I want to be, because I've got enough. Look at my head. I've got enough on my plate at the moment, as you can see, overactive knife and fork. I've got enough on my plate at the moment. I don't know if I think a true entrepreneur would scale a business, take a business like mine, yeah, make it franchisable and make all things business in in another 20 counties. That's a proper entrepreneur, in my opinion. Is
that a proper entrepreneur, or is that just somebody who's good at business?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'd say that's a real entrepreneur. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I've probably got entrepreneurial traits, and I might see things differently. But I don't know. I don't put myself in that league of entrepreneurs. And if you were to refer to me as one, I would feel that would make me feel awkward. That would be really awkward. So don't.
Okay. So you're going through your merger at the moment. There'll be more coming on that as the time comes out, probably by the time this podcast comes out. We've just sort of gone through why you do this. Is there a milestone or a point in time where you would sit back and just say, I've done it?
Well, I have milestones, like for the business, but they're not like 3 and 5 year business plans. They're annual. I have an annual plan. I have one eye maybe on next year as well, but I'm always working 12 months ahead, and then I break it down into quarters. And I've done that since the pandemic, because I did do a 5-year business plan after I bought Chris and Dan out, and that got ripped up 3 months later because of the pandemic, or 6 months later. So I do have milestones. I've probably only, some of those have changed significantly, and that's probably because more dictated by family. You know, I've got a 13-year-old daughter, and I started this journey. My first wobble in business, my first bump in the road came when Taylor was born. And the fact that she could be in business or could be leaving, well, we'll probably be leaving the family home in 4 or 5 years' time, is bloody scary. And I think there's maybe parts of her childhood that I've missed out on, which makes me feel sad sometimes. Bo is 10, and I think I haven't missed out on as much maybe with her. And Rocco's my little centre half, he's 3, and I'm determined not to miss out on as much of his. So some of my milestones are certainly more family orientated, And that might sound strange because I don't know if I'm on my own here, Richard, but all of my milestones really have been business focused. It's only been in recent years that they've been family focused. And I've beaten myself up about that. I felt really guilty about that.
Well, when did that shift? Or was there a particular trigger that caused that to shift?
I think probably the pandemic has, probably this last 18 months. Because on one hand, the pandemic has shown the great inhumanity within our local community, yeah? But it's also shown, in my opinion, that this country is not in the best hands. And I'm not going to go down the political route here because I don't trust any politician. Members of Parliament are called MPs, and I've got a different terminology for MPs. But I've found that quite scary. When you can shut a country down and have tens of millions of people gathering around a TV set for weeks on end to see how many people have died the day before, that's scary. That's really scary. And I feel that I felt that the mainstream media have, through their negative reporting, have had a massive impact on people's mental health, and those that maybe suffered a little bit with anxiety now suffer a lot with it, caused by that. So I think, to answer your question, I think the pandemic has definitely been a turning point for me in terms of being more family focused now, and being grateful for what I have got, or what we have got, rather than what we haven't. Whereas I think before that, it was always reaching for the stars and, let's do another 25%, let's do another 20%, whereas it isn't. My mindset's shifted quite a lot there. So
life is finite. At some point it comes to an end. So how would you like to be remembered?
What, on my gravestone?
Yeah, on your gravestone.
Oh, bloody hell, Richard. I thought we'd end on a high. We'll have a glass of tequila on the way out. Ben Merville Thomas, the man that tried to make a difference. You'll never walk alone.
Never walk alone. I like that. But I think the key point, and something which I've picked out from this conversation, is for whatever reason that seems to drive you, listening to you talk today, and whatever you've got hitting you within your own business, there always seems to be a point where you're looking at see where you can make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's down to my mum and dad, the way I've been brought up.
Yeah.
Be kind. Manners cost nothing. And I do believe in karma. And I think if you treat, again, my dad, treat people how you want to be treated, Ben. I gave you your name, and it's a good name. If you mess it up, it's down to you. And he told me that from a very young age, and I used to think, oh, whatever, Dad, But he's right. And treat people how you want to be treated. If everybody did that, this world that we live in would be a lot better. But unfortunately, it isn't. And I think, like, for me, it's just, if I want my team to come into work every day and want to be here, I want to make a difference for them. I encourage them all to have vision boards. Some of them do. So I don't know. Some of them probably think, oh, he's off on one again. But the one I know for a fact, the ones that have got vision boards are the ones that have gone on that holiday or have achieved that thing that they wanted to do, or are now on the property ladder, and they've achieved those things because it was the last thing they look at night. It's the first thing they look at in the morning. And if I can make their life better whilst they work with me, because I've got an obligation to them. Where if they're on this journey with me and they leave after 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, I have to make them a better individual from the moment they leave to the moment they started with me. And I think, generally speaking, everybody that works with me, I can look them in the eye and say, yeah, I've definitely done that with you. And it's just, be kind.
I think that's a great one to finish on. Thank you very much for sharing your story there. And I look forward to seeing how the journey continues.
Cheers, mate.
Okay.